Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Batman Returns. Now, in case you missed our last video, there I talked about how much I grew up with Batman 89. My mum, she basically taped it off the TV, but would stop recording every time it got violent. So I had a sort of cut up version of the film, and though I still loved it, I didn't get the full version of it until many years later. On the other side of it, Batman Returns was a film I got the official VHS of, which at 5 years old, might not have been the best thing looking back. However, I was absolutely in love with this film as a kid, and I've lost count of how many times I've watched it. This was the Batman that raised me, and I can't wait to journey back through it. So come with me as we break down the movie and talk about all the hidden details within it. This will cover the Easter eggs and making of trivia and basically everything you need to know about the movie. With that out of the way, huge thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Batman Returns. So the title Returns is of course a staple within film franchises. Beyond that though, it's also a big part of Batman's history. When they were originally pitching Batman, they used Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns as a basis to demonstrate the tone. This was in a time in which Batman was seen as camp due to the 66 show, and the word returns also played into some of the scripts. When they were developing that original movie, one of them was called The Return of the Batman. This would help the studios to get the idea of what kind of film they were making, so that word actually means a lot for the sequel. Originally though, there were no plans to make one, with Burton being completely disinterested in continuing the story. However, Batman 89 had made big bucks, with it being the 5th highest grossing film of all time. Now, becoming as skilled as Batman would obviously take a lot of time. The guys travelled the globe to become the Dark Knight, but what if I told you he could have learned it all at home in a Dark Knight? That's why I've teamed up with Skillshare, the #1 online hub skill for development. A lot of people are on back to school mode now, and there's never been a better time to check out Skillshare. Now, being a YouTuber has meant I've really got to be equipped with a lot of skills for the job. Though you punks, you think I sit about watching movies non-stop every day, which is true, there's also a lot of things that I have to do for the job. This includes writing scripts, doing voiceover work, mixing audio, editing videos, designing thumbnails, and uploading the videos with SEO friendly terms that make them stand out when you're searching for topics. Even social media is a big part of the job, and there's so many things you have to study in order to build a channel up. Skillshare is the perfect place for me to develop everything like this, and its endless amount of online courses have massively helped me at the channel. There's hundreds of experts on there for me, like Marquise Brownlee to Lily Singh, and whatever you're trying to learn, this is the best site in the world to advance your skill set. Whether you just want to improve what you're already doing or pivot to a new career, you'll find fulfillment on the website with all its amazing courses. The Skillshare platform is now also available in French, Spanish, Portuguese and German, or any language of your choice. Skillshare is ad-free as well, so you can stay in the zone while exploring new skills. New premium classes are launched each and every week, so every day is a school day that will help you to improve. The first 500 people who use my link in the description will also receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. I've left my tracking link in the comments, and huge thank you to everyone who uses this opportunity to help the channel and also help themselves improve whatever way they want to. Thank you. Now though with the first one, Burton was pretty much a new name, the release of Batman had given him a lot of clout. He directed Edward Scissorhands a year later and was currently in the midst of doing Nightmare Before Christmas. There was a lot of buzz around this, and Burton had worked his way up to now being a big name. Keaton also stated he'd only return with Burton at the helm, so he agreed to come back, but made it clear he didn't want to be hampered by the studio. Burton had openly said Batman was the worst of his films, and that he'd felt reined in by it needing to be commercial. Burton said he wanted full creative control, and the studio begrudgingly agreed. Now with this, Burton ended up firing the original writer Sam Hamm, and he brought on board his buddy Daniel Waters. Hamm's outline was going to bring back Billy D. Williams and have Harvey Dent's descent into Two-Face. It was also going to feature Robin, which we'll talk more about in just a bit. A lot of this continuation can be found in the Batman 89 graphic novel, which showcases both of the characters. It's written by Sam Hamm, and the artwork's of course very similar, so if you want to know what happens, then definitely pick this up. Either way, Max Schreck's character ended up taking a lot of what they were planning to do with Harvey, and we'll talk later on about where he was going to switch to Two-Face. However, the guy got dropped by Warner Brothers, and the worst thing is they didn't even tell Burton he couldn't do it. Now where things differ in Waters and Ham is that the latter seems to actually get Batman. He didn't want the character to do any killing, and he was going to be driven by trauma. Waters thought that he should reflect modern times and be a nihilistic Dark Knight that fought without mercy. He even had a line in which Batman said Gotham didn't deserve protection.
Just know that I don't give a
Keaton was the one who felt it should be removed and that Batman shouldn't really speak unless it's absolutely necessary. Like, I don't even think Keaton has any lines for the first 25 minutes of the film. Now because of this, let's say lack of character, the writer and director really wanted to focus on the villains. They also wanted to up the stakes from the first film and thus brought in 2 instead of 1. This would then kickstart a long-standing Batman tradition in which each film had multiple villains. Forever had Riddler and Two-Face, Batman and Robin had Freeze, Bane and Ivy, and even the Nolan and Reeves movies, they've all got multiple villains. So that was originally the plan, with them planning on using Riddler and Penguin. Danny DeVito was cast to play the latter, with Robin Williams being eyed to play the former. However, if you've seen our Batman breakdown, then you'll know how they screwed him over on the Joker. So he ended up turning this down and kind of forced the direction of the way that things ended up shaping out. Originally, Ham had planned to continue with Vicky Vale and we were going to see her and Bruce get engaged. However, they decided to bring in Catwoman, who was going to be a love interest and a villain. When looking through all the background material, I think it became clear where Burton's head was at. He was way more interested in the villains, and the guy was hell-bent on making them as freakish as possible. He said Penguin in the comics and shows was just a guy with a top hat that smoked cigarettes and quacked a lot. He didn't really have a backstory or anything that elevated him beyond that. So Burton wanted to make him a little fat creature with webbed hands that salivated black bile. Catwoman was also going to be heavily traumatized and brought back to life by cats literally licking her. He saw the two are common on society, with Penguin being a reflection of Bruce. Whereas he lost his parents in a mugging, Penguins literally tossed him out. Selina was also going to be a disenfranchised secretary who was a comment on contemporary feminism. When you look at the movie, the 3 bad guys definitely reflect Batman in one way or another. The Penguin's an orphan that comes from a rich family that reflects Bruce. Selina's a vigilante who dons a black costume and goes out into the night. And lastly, we have Max Schreck, who's a big businessman in Gotham, with a pair even meeting through this avenue at one point. They all highlight what would happen if he went bad, and it's a great way to reflect the Dark Knight. So that's the groundwork. And you know what, mate? This has got Happy Meal toys attached to it. What? Now, like the first film, we begin with the Warner Brothers logo, which then alters and changes. As I mentioned last time, Batman 89 was one of the first films where they added effects to it, and here we see a further transition. Turning into a dark night with snow coming down, we travel to the Cobblepot estate. This includes an establishing shot in which we zoom into their manor. This framing is later repeated at Penguin's lair, which is also filmed in a similar way. It's also obviously meant to echo Bruce's home, which we see later on. At the gates, we also have statues of angelic babies, which could highlight what the Cobblepots were expecting from their child. Pointing up to the window, we're then introduced to Oswald's father. Played by Paul Rubens, the actor had of course worked with Burton on Pee-wee's Big Adventure. However, he wasn't the person they originally had for the role. The creative teams initially asked Burgess Meredith, who played Penguin on the 66 show. However, the actor fell ill and had to pull out, so they ended up getting Rubens in instead. They do retain a nod to the 60s show though, with them smoking a cigarette in a long holder and also wearing a monocle. Along with the suit, you can see a lot of familiarity, and it's a nice way to visually call back to that. Now, we later meet his wife Esther, who's played by Diane Salinger, who was also in Pee-wee's Big Adventure as Simone. Hearing her screams of labor coming from a room, we see how the nurses and doctors are absolutely horrified. This is then made worse by his dad's screams, and it instantly makes you wonder what the baby looks like. We never get to see him in this opening at all, with him constantly being kept behind covers. Which I think, keeping a kid in a black cage, it's child abuse, mate. What do you mean you've dumped him in a river? Now, I love the subtext here, as it highlights who the real monsters are, with their mistreatment of what should have been one of the sons of Gotham trying to bring the city down. Anyway, they tease that there's something bad within the cage as we see it writhe and shift across the floor. There's also some really nice bits of foreshadowing that kind of play into what's coming down the line. In front of Penguin's cage, we can see a golden duck which is dangling down almost to act like a mobile. This duck must have stuck in his head because it looks exactly like the duck car that he uses later on. We also see as the family cat walks by the cage and Oswald ends up pulling it inside. He does this by wooing it over, and inside seems like he's ripping it apart. Give me a stiff drink. Now this kind of sums up Oswald and Catwoman's relationship though. Initially they start off as friends before the pair end up becoming enemies. Penguin even even tries to woo her at one point, so I love they foreshadow this here in the opening. We then see as they take Oswald out to what would later become his base. Wearing all black, they pass by a family pushing a white pram, which symbolically shows a difference between the two families. One's happy and left in the light, while the others are in black and trying to get rid of their child. Now, I always had a theory that this other family's the Waynes, and we're seeing the difference between the sides. That's likely a reach, but I love the way the colours here show the contrast. Either way, the Cobblepots toss him over the bridge, and we watch as he floats through the sewers. This actually starts off one of our many Moses references, which you might pick up as being laced throughout the movie. Moses was of course placed in a basket and then sent off down the Nile. This then led to him being brought into a kingdom that he took down, and you could see the politics in Gotham sort of aligning alongside that. Now the other similarity comes at the end when we discover what Oswald's true plan is. He wants to kill the firstborn sons of all the families in Gotham, which somewhat plays upon God's retribution. Later in the movie, Bruce learns about his past when he's researching the circus and also their aquatic bird boy. From this we discover that whenever the circus was in town, that several children in the area went missing. So his MO was likely to kill these other kids. If you read the novelization, it also says that during this time he actually learned who his parents were and that he's the one who secretly killed them. That's not in the movie, but we watch as the baby basket then floats through the tunnels, and we see this journey at 3 points in the movie. The second comes when Oswald's exposed and he ends up running back to the bridge and jumping over it. This is very much his return to being the Penguin and going back to the darkness. The third point comes when Batman drives in the Batboat, and these three journeys symbolize journeying into the abyss. This is all part of the hero's journey, although it's laid out differently here to how it's typically told. But this bit when I was a kid though, this was like the fast forward bit. As an adult though, I love the gloomy and dark journey through, and Elfman's score is once more perfect. As Oswald arrives, we also see him landing on a ramp, which is then approached by penguins. This is where they later carry him to his watery grave, so it brings things full circle from his arrival. Now the penguins they use throughout the movie are a mix between real life ones and mechanical ones. I worded that badly. I don't mean they're like half robot, I mean they're like half of them on set are real and the other half are robotic, but that would have been good. Built by the great Stan Winston, he created 30 full body puppets. Cable operated and radio controlled, each one had over 200 mechanical parts. Some were suits in which little people could step into them, and then someone at the side would operate the faces and wings. You really can't tell the difference in moments like this though, and Winston said that the real ones didn't even know themselves. He said that after going to pick them up at the end of the day, he found some of the real penguins snuggled up to the fake ones. No one said it sounds like those emperor penguins were treated like an emperor. We really need someone to come in and help me with these jokes. The birds were apparently flown over on refrigerated airplanes and had chilled green rooms as well as cold swimming pools on set. According to IMDb trivia, they were also stocked daily with half a ton of ice and a constant supply of fish. Now along with Moses, we also get more biblical allusions in the time jump. Cutting to 33 years later, this makes the penguin the same age. Jesus was 33 when he died, with this making Penguin a sort of penguin Jesus, I guess. However, there are lots of ties to Christ and Christmas in the movie. At this point in his career, Burton seemed obsessed with the holiday and was heavily lacing it throughout his films. You put the sets of Edward Scissorhands up next to this, and you could easily have either character walk under the other and not look out of place. He was also heavily involved at this point with The Nightmare Before Christmas, which was massively moving through its pre-production while all this was going on. Now I feel like Burton's attacking the idea of commercialism, and this is why one of the main villains, the owner of a department store. Burton of course also felt burned by the studio on that first film, so this could be his sort of Todd Phillips to the studio. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen the new Joker. Now Gotham is also further stylized to play off the city from Metropolis. We can see giant faces and high-rise bridges, which would later be expanded upon in Forever, and also Batman and Robin. Now, unfortunately, Anton Furst died in 1991 and he never worked on the movie. I do feel like this film's missing his style, though they clearly have tried to mimic what he did. Cutting to Gotham Square, we then see the Gotham Christmas tree lights being turned on. Watching from the shadows, I love how they also use this to segue into our first look at Alfred. Initially, Alfred mocks the reports on the Penguin, but right after he hears something coming from the sewers. This report's also brought to us by the Gotham Globe, who are the newspaper outlet that Knox and Vale worked at. We then cut to the outside of Shrek's, which is when we pan up to see its giant cat mascot. No prices for guest guessing what that's foreshadowing, especially with who we learn works here. Catwoman later shows up to destroy the joint, and she places her face inside the logo in some nice visual imagery. Now, this design was based upon Felix the Cat, and it's not the only nod to a classic character. The name Max Schreck is actually the name of the actor who originally played Nosferatu. Nosferatu is of course a vampire, and Shrek's plan is to suck power from the city. Shrek was intended to imply that not all villains wear costumes, and that evil comes in all shapes and sizes. And wigs. This added an extra dimension to him that they felt they weren't gonna get with Harvey Dent. Now, Dent's part as Two-Face was originally only intended to be a setup, with the idea being that he'd appear in the third film. Now, how this was gonna happen would be later on at the party. When Penguin arrives, it's to a massive explosion which was gonna have Dent caught in the blast. I did wonder if this masked party would play into his face being messed up, and if we'd get something like Phantom of the Opera. I wasn't able to find anything beyond the explosion going off though. There is a reference to Phantom of the Opera, which we'll talk about when we get to that scene. Now, Christopher Walken also wasn't the first choice for the role, and initially they approached David Bowie. Bowie ended up turning it down because he wanted to do Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me. Now, Burton was reluctant to cast Walken, but not for the typical reasons you might think. He actually thought Walken as a guy was really scary, and after this he'd later cast him in Sleepy Hollow. So guessing the guys got along in the end, but yeah, he's almost got this garish and nightmarish look to him, mainly because of the wig and the eyebrows. Now, he was based on Vincent Price, with Walken also looking at Sol Hurrick and Samuel Goldwyn. He immediately captures your interest because he just looks so weird, and in this scene we're also introduced to Selina Kyle. Played by Michelle Pfeiffer, she actually came in as a last-minute replacement. Annette Bening was initially cast in the role, but she had to drop out due to becoming pregnant. They then looked at the likes of Jodie Foster, Cher and Madonna. Who really wanted it though was Sean Young, and I'll let her and the news tell you the story.
She wanted the part of Catwoman in the upcoming sequel to the 1989 blockbuster Batman.
My agent called me up, said that they wouldn't give me a meeting.
So the actress took matters into her own hands, renting a jet and flying from Arizona to Los Angeles to confront Burton at his office.
I heard he hid under the desk, and he wouldn't see me.
Now, early on we get the tussle between the mayor and Shrek, with the former being against his power plant plan. Outside, this leads into Shrek saying he could get him voted out, which then leads into his plot to make Cobblepot the mayor. Penguin running for mayor was an episode in the 66 show, and it's somewhat become a staple of the comics. Even stuff like Earth 1, they've had the character as that, and I do wonder if they'll have Penguin running against Bella Real in the Batman Reeves universe. Now, back in the office we see Selina clearing up. On the wall we can spot some photos of Shrek with him rubbing shoulders with some very familiar faces. These include Ronald Reagan, Elvis and Sammy Davis Jr. Davis appeared at one point in the 66 show, and there's also a photo. Is that a photo of Mr. Freeze?
The Iceman cometh.
Now obviously that's just Arnie, but my headcanon says this is Victor Freeze before the events of Batman and Robin. Now, Selina forgot to give the speech to him, and thus he has to improvise. Talking about gifts and wrapping the city in a big bow, we see as the Red Triangle gang roll into town. Made up of several real-life circus performers, the troupe also includes Doug Jones. Playing the role of the Thin Clown, he's of course gone on to have a massive career playing weird and makeup covered characters. Now, the majority of the gang all have red triangles on their face, which is of course the symbol of the group. Who doesn't know is Vincent Schiavelli, who makes a big grand entrance with his monkey and a minigun. Now, Vincent was actually a really close friend of Danny DeVito, and the pair worked together on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was of course alongside Jack Nicholson, who was the one who told Danny to take the role. Nicholson had a gazillion Joker bucks from that first movie, and he convinced DeVito the makeup chair would be worth all that cash. In that film, Nicholson also got his friend Tracy Walters cast, with him playing his right-hand man Bob. So DeVito used that as a way to get Vincent hired, and it all kind of builds out from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which probably has also inspired Arkham Asylum over the years. Now, though the Red Triangle gang don't appear in the comics per se, they clearly take influence from the kind of gangs employed by the Joker and Penguin. The gang then cause pandemonium, and I love how at 12:52 we see a big guy beating someone with a sled. This is the same sled that the guy was carrying at the store at the start of the scene, so you kind of ruined Christmas for someone. But this is who Batman later straps some dynamite to in what's probably one of the movie's most controversial moments. Like, Batman outright blows this guy up. Keaton actually said that's his favourite part of the film though, and I'll not argue with him because that's Batman. Now, Gordon arrives and instructs them to activate the signal, and we get what's probably my favourite Bruce Wayne moment of all time. Lighting up the sky, we then see mirrors dotted about the manor that align like Egyptian lights and shine the signal directly into Bruce's study. Love how the guy's just sitting there in solitude, almost like he has nothing else else going on in his life. Bruce is just brooding, waiting for something to happen because being Batman's the only purpose that he has. Like, guy legitimately has nothing else in his life. Epically standing up, I love how he stands against the signal at the back, and yeah, what an incredible piece of cinematography. Now, you might also notice the Iron Maiden at the back, which we later learn's an entrance to the Batcave. I will talk about that later on, but it kind of builds off the collection of worldly things that Bruce had in the first film. Now, as the gang go to get Shrek, we see as his sonship buys him time, which allows him to race through the streets. Seeing a performer dressed as a devil, we then get some notes from Desiree. Now, Desiree is actually about the Last Judgment and those burning in the eternal flames of hell. It's a piece that's heavily influenced Elfman's score, so it's nice that he pays further tribute to it here. Now, the Batmobile then arrives, and I always loved as a kid how it just had bits that popped out the side to trip people up. It's very James Bondian and filled with gadgets that allow it to make short work of the gang. Batman wastes absolutely no time with them, and even sets a devil guy on fire through using the afterburner. He's got no chill. I love how he also pulls out the wall behind one of the clowns who brags that he missed. Stuff like that, it's become a bit of a cliche now, but it all kind of comes from this. For me anyway, I'm sure there's an earlier example. Just paints Batman out as being a badass though, and someone who's far more competent than he was last time. Now, after an introduction to Selina, we see she grabs a cat head shaped taser that later becomes a weapon. She uses it here on the guy, and then later on with Shrek during her quote unquote death. So it kind of bookends the character nicely with her using it on the first and last man in the movie that tries to harm her. Cutting over to the zoo, we get a swooping shot of the area, and as a kid, I always thought this giant crab was real and that it had just frozen to death. Never understood why it hadn't just stepped over the fence, and yeah, good to know, I've always been an idiot. Now, as we pan over everything, you might also notice that there's giant ducks hanging from the cable lines, with one of these of course being used for Penguin's ride. In the sewers, we finally meet adult Oz, and he tells Shrek of his plan. I love the monologue he kind of goes off on about how he wants to be a bear and out of the sewers. It's almost like the Little Mermaid, but here we're faced with a horrible aquatic fish bird boy. Winston also worked on this design, and he created several prosthetics. This included a gigantic nose prosthetic along with crooked teeth and an eyebrow appliance. They also used similar paint to Joker to make his skin white and added in dark black circles around his eyes. Displaying his collection of umbrellas, these are of course the signature weapons of the character in the comics. You also see his gang including Poodle Lady, who's pretty much one of Batman's biggest foes ever. Not even joking, like her and the Poodle, they legitimately stop his Batarang later on and foil him at several points. Anyway, Penguin goes off on his monologue pointing to the surface world, and we see the bile running out of his mouth. Now, originally this was going to tie into his death, with them discussing how the character had a stomach infection. At the hour 50 mark, we see the character falling, which is when he's taken out of the picture for a bit. He then comes out of it for one final hurrah before collapsing and dying. And that fall into the water definitely wasn't at a height that would have been fatal. Yet still, Penguin dies when he manages to get out. You might notice that the bile here is almost completely black, and that it's much darker than how it was at the beginning. This is to highlight how the infection had gotten worse and was slowly tearing him apart. So the fall didn't hurt him enough to kill him, and it was actually the infection that got the best of him in the end. That's what they planned anyway, but yeah, it was only really upon doing my research that I even ever considered it. Now, I love how Penguins looked through Shrek's sewage and taped together his shredded documents and found the hand of a guy he had killed. This kind of foreshadows he's not against getting rid of his employees, which we later see with Selina. Now, speaking of her, we catch her with a very 90s apartment. I absolutely love how they basically do this scene twice and later on repeat it right after her fall. It's such a brilliant way to show the before and after, and they do some really creative things. The cats are later running amok, and we also have the neon sign being changed. Initially it says hello there, and after smashing it up it says hell yeah. We also have the answering machine playing messages from her nagging mother and her love interest cancelling their getaway. Selina says she should have let him win racquetball, and this kind of plays into her character. We've seen two scenes now where she's tried to be assertive, but in the end she's been shot down by men. Here she's getting dumped by her boyfriend, and then when standing up to Shrek she gets dumped out a window. The Now Playing podcast brought up how this movie's commenting on feminism in the 90s, and how women would then become these more assertive figures in the workplace as the playing fields became more balanced. Now, these messages later trigger her after she gets an advert for perfume sold at Shrek's store. It says that it will have the boss wanting you to stay after work for a candlelit stash staff meeting, which a bit weird to sell it like that. I wouldn't say to MT. How about what we have here is her leaving a message to herself to remind her about the files she left at the office. Returning back there, she admits to Shrek she had a little look into the protected files and learned the power plant sucking it from the city. Oop, not a good idea to admit that. Now when sitting down, they do a great visual thing through the lighting. Shining it up at Pfeiffer's face, they managed to create a mask-like shape through the shadows from her glasses. Whether this was intentional or not, it felt like a great callback to Eartha Kitt. Catwoman's mask later takes on this shape, and it's such a creative way to use shadow to foreshadow the future. Pushing her out the window, we follow her all the way down, and then watch as she's revived by cats. This was achieved by hiding tuna in her suit, and then all of them ran over to eat it. Now in later films and shows, we'd learn what it is that happened here. Don't shoot the messenger, mate, but what this was supposed to indicate was that the goddess Bast brought her back to life. In 2002's Birds of Prey, we learned this made her a meta-human, and thus when she gave birth to Helena Kyle, she inherited her cat-like abilities. Halle Berry's Catwoman would later explain Bast brought her back from the dead, and they sort of did a Moon Knight thing where she was an avatar of the god. Personally, I always just thought she had her full cushioned by the fabric and the snow, and then the cats stirred her out of her unconsciousness. Now she then wreaks havoc on her home, which is such a satisfying scene to watch. It's very much highlighting how Catwoman's tearing down this image of a pink Stepford Wives type Barbie and replacing it with a black leather-laced vixen. It's basically the entire plot of Grease in 2 minutes. Along the way, we also get some more of those subtle Burton visual nods. Selena opens her cupboard to spray paint a t-shirt, and you can see 2 cats on the front of it. At the top, you can also see 2 penguins with them wearing a hat and tuxedo, just like the character. Now Selena, if you need a new t-shirt with a little link to the penguin, then you should check out our merch store right below the video. On there, we've got our pick up a penguin shirt to celebrate the character in his brand new show. You also have our alien chestburster one, theory time, and more. It all goes towards helping videos like this get made, and huge thank you to everyone who's picked one up. Now Catwoman also creates her own costume here as well, but apparently this was a nightmare to wear. To get it to be skin tight, they had to vacuum seal it and then quickly film the scene. They then let her out, otherwise she'd become lightheaded and pass out. Pfeiffer has said she'll never wear it again, but guys, we'll always have the memories. Like apparently they stopped setting out posters for this with Catwoman on because people used to steal it. Now in the first positive PR move for Oz, we see him saving a baby during a press conference. In the background of this, we can see a statue of Atlas which pulls from the Greek myth of him holding up the world. This is where the weight of the world on your shoulders saying comes from, and I kind of feel it might be about Batman. That's because we have that at the back and then the penguins introduced at the front. Reach! What we have though is Penguin making a grand entrance as a savior, and Gotham's of course accustomed to having freaks saving innocents. Now I love how absolutely no one questions it either. You have Shrek getting in place to pose for a picture with him, and he clearly already knows him. Classic. What I questioned though was how he managed to rise up with a platform from the sewer without that big duck head smashing into the ceiling. Now this launches into a news report, and I actually think Bruce sees a lot of common ground with him. Here is someone who seems to be able to reconnect with the parents they lost, and you can see why he's so fixated on this news report. Luckily, this doesn't last long, and he starts immediately investigating him. Like absolutely no reason, but he just starts looking into his past because something seems off about him. You're worse than his parents, mate. Also, who's making leather flipper gloves for humans? I have no idea. How many of them do you sell a year? Be honest. Probably more than my t-shirts. Now we then see Penguin going to the Hall of Records where he's apparently looking for his parents. As we said earlier though, he's likely well aware and is instead writing the names of all the firstborn sons in Gotham. In an early script, he actually found Max Schreck's name here and discovered he was his brother. Glad they scrapped it because it raises a lot of questions that don't need to be here. At the back here, we see Bruce doing his research, and I love how in the top right you can catch the exit of the slide that he later rides down in. Bruce also gets served some vichyssoise, which no idea why that's in the movie, but it's a nice little character interaction. Get me a can of cold soup. When looking into the reports, we also hear about other members of the gang such as the Poodle Lady and the world's fattest man. In the original script, the Snake Woman was also going to get more of a character. Portrayed by real-life circus performer Flame, she was going to be the first member of the gang shown to the audience. According to IMDb trivia, she'd be at Gotham Square and would be standing in the crowd. We then see her from the back before she turned her head to reveal a red triangle over her eye. She then sends snakes towards the police and the box would explode and then unleash the gang. Personally, I prefer the way they did it in the end, but I always feel bad for actors when their role gets cut down. Now we then see as Batman goes to the Hall of Records and looks at Penguin still working away. I think that's an intimidation tactic that, mate. Why don't you like him? You're racist. And the next day he continues the publicity stunts and visits visits his parents' graves. Neither are given a date of death, and you might notice that Burton avoided using years throughout all the news reports and things like this to keep Gotham feeling timeless. It's here that Oswald announces he's the Penguin and that he's actually Oswald Cobblepot. This line's later flipped when he's exposed as a villain and he corrects people and calls himself the Penguin.
So, Mr. Penguin,
A penguin is a bird that cannot fly. I have a name. Oswald Cobblepot. My name's not Penguin. It's Oswald Cobblepot. My name is not Oswald. It's Penguin.
We also get this line,
I was their number one son, and they treated me like number two.
which f***ing hell, mate. Akin to the news reports in the first film, we get the exposition in the film told to us through the use of newspapers. However, this time we have citizens reading the headlines and talking about what the public feel. In this, we get a cameo from Elizabeth Sanders, who was Bob Kane's wife. She appeared throughout the rest of the films in the Burtonverse, with her playing Gossip Gertie in the following two. That night, we also see the arrival of Catwoman. Saving a woman, she also goes off on the victim too, and shows she's not really a hero like Batman.
I am Catwoman. Hear me roar.
The next day, we see Wayne actually using his business connects for once to confront a villain in a different setting. In Shrek's boardroom, he comes face to face with him about the power plant.
I'm gonna fight you on this.
Shrek then says,
You think you could go 15 rounds with Muhammad Shrek?
which is of course a nod to Muhammad Ali. I did wonder if this was also playing off the DC comic in which Ali fought against Superman. Obviously we have Batman here, but it did cross my mind because it's such a standout line. Anyway, at this point Selina returns, and again I got a lot of Sandy from the end of Grease from this. She's changed her hair, is rocking a black jacket, and kinda confidently moving about the office. Saying she has amnesia, Shrek sees it as being a get out of jail free card. For now. Also, I love how Chip's in on it too, like the guy's fully aware his dad pushed a woman out a window and tried to kill her, but he doesn't care. Now, this scene's kinda used to push Selina and Bruce together, with the latter asking her out on a date. It's a nice little scene with the elevator that just kind of elevates it above being your boring let's do dinner thing. From here we then see Shrek shows up to Oswald's. What are you doing there, Penguin? How come you're furiously scribbling down children's names in your notepad? What's with that? Anyway, he's lured down by a raw fish, and we watch as he sees his campaign team. In what's a nice bit of attention to detail, I love how you can also see the Gotham Yellow pages. We then watch as he's introduced to his image consultants. This woman's clearly terrified, like visibly uncomfortable, and my guy gets his nose bitten after smugly making a joke about there not being many reflective surfaces in the sewers. Played by Steve Whitting, this wasn't the only run-in with Devito that he had this year. During the movie Hoffa, he also played a federal agent where he was kicked out of an office by Devito's Bobby Cairo. I love the fake out laugh and build up to this, and yeah, the movie's just filled with so many memorable scenes. That fish, yeah, that raw fish is real as well, and DeVito actually ate it to get closer to the character. Just such a weird movie though, and they sold Happy Meals attached to this. Guy's clearly just in his own fantasy of showing girls his French flipper trick, and he fantasizes about women seeing him.
That's the biggest parasol I've ever seen.
Which yeah, just got an image of a woman going crazy over a giant umbrella. Realizing they need a trigger to call an election, they then decide to use the gang to cause havoc in the city. Shrek suggests
The Reichstag fire.
Now this fire was an act of arson committed against the German Parliament building, which the Nazi Party used as a way to destabilise the government. They claim they'd guard against attacks like this, though it is believed that they were the ones who did it. Oz then further links to the fire rising and says,
Burn, baby, burn!
Cutting to the poodle carrying a grenade. I don't know if you've ever tried to get a dog to do, well, anything, but you might wonder how they pull this off. So they actually had two trainers with the dog running to the first one before then running to the second. The more you know. Now Batman then shows up and busts some heads before throwing his pre-programmed batarang. This was one of the first cases of CGI being used in a major motion picture, with it actually being the first time it appeared in a Batman film. The Abyss, Terminator 2 and so on, they of course had done effects before, but this was another stepping stone towards using it to pull off impossible things. Later on when we see the shields on the car, these were also done through CGI this time, as opposed to how they were handled in Batman 89. Now with Catwoman, we see she whips the heads off the mannequins. Pfeiffer actually managed to nail this entire thing in one take, and you can see the behind the scenes of this online. Though the mannequins did have collapsible heads that would drop them on impact, she still managed to hit all of them first go. Anyway, back with Batman, we get a Wilhelm scream. Batman also comes face to face with the Muscle Man, who he can't beat, so he just sticks some dynamite to him and pushes him in a sewer, just casually walking off there. Selina then creates a bigger one at the Shrek store, and we see all three main characters come face to face for the first time. Now, this is how you have characters meet.
Meow.
Now I know this stuff, it probably seems camp now amongst our realistic and gritty films, but just watching Penguin have an umbrella helicopter, it blew me away as a kid. I think there's such a feeling of like more innocent times where they weren't too interested in physics and realism and just kind of wanted to keep surprising the audience. On the roof we then see how Catwoman uses her gender to catch Bruce off guard.
How could you? I'm a woman.
I'm sorry,
Obviously though, as a dude, you would have this kind of moral conflict, and I think that sorry here kind of shows Bruce's humanity. Just having him apologise to a villain, it's such a great way to show how she's able to play him. Catwoman's always kind of weaponised this, and it's why the pair have had such a great relationship over the years. I feel like Burton's completely nailing it, even in their first encounter, and it highlights how she's able to go toe to toe with him.
As I was saying, I'm a woman and can't be taken for granted.
Smacking Catwoman into some kitty litter, I love how we can see damage to her suit. This stays consistent throughout the film, with it getting worse and worse. However, she does try and repair it, and we can later see the arm stitched back about the hour 4 mark. We also see Bruce's suit with a nail being stuck into the side. This is something Nolan's movies would later adopt as well, with the sides being weak points that villains could exploit. Cutting across to the Penguin's campaign, we see as he announces his push for mayor.
And you're the hottest young person a role model could have.
Swear this guy's gonna be a sexual harassment case nightmare, mate.
It's about reaching out to people, touching people, groping people.
Bloody hell.
Just the pussy I've been looking for.
Fuck's sake, Happy Meal attached to this.
Naked, sexual, charisma.
Now, but the Happy Meal thing is actually true, and the rumours were that McDonald's and Warner Brothers weren't too happy with the tone of the film. Though Happy Meal toys were launched, they had to pull some of them because so many parents complained. Kenner also worried as well, and they'd been tasked with making the movie's action figures. Now, if you can find one for the Penguin, you'll see it looks nothing like the movie counterpart. They thought the film version was just too scary and changed the jacket on the Superpower Collection one. Now, amongst the sets, you might also notice they made a Robin one as well. Neil Adams designed a new version of the character and gave him a bow staff, which has since become a big part of several iterations. Though he was eventually written out of the script, Kenner still decided to release the toy anyway. Now, Marlon Wayans was cast in the role, with them also promising to have him in Batman Forever. However, this fell apart, but the guy was locked into a pay-or-play deal. This meant that even though he never featured in either film, he still receives residual checks to this day. Now, as Catwoman lies down, you might also notice the stitching starting to come apart on her arms and back. She also has a bit where her eye socket's starting to tear, which we could see when she landed in the truck. Now, Penguin divulges they've got the blueprints for Batman's Batmobile. The novelization had these being from a disgruntled engineer who helped to design it. I love the idea that Bruce cheaped out on him, and hey, you can't trust them bloody billionaires. Alfred doesn't even have a pension, and that's why he's still working.
Sir, are you entirely sure I'm cut out for this vigilante business?
In the original treatment, we also had a vaster scene with the rescue of the Ice Princess. There, Batman was going to be so distracted by fighting the gang as he worked his way up to the penthouse, he just forgot to put the shields on. Kinda makes him seem like a moron, so they rightfully had it laid out like this. Catwoman doesn't want to kill him though, and instead they plan on framing him to tear down his image. Now, we then get a scene that always sticks in my mind with this movie. This involves Pfeiffer putting a live bird in her mouth that then flies out.
What the hell is even that?
Initially, they were just going to use a puppet, but Pfeiffer felt the birds looked too fake. Later on, she admitted that looking back, she hadn't considered the risk of swallowing it or even the diseases involved. Me, I would have worried about it pooping in my mouth because I can't imagine it would have been absolutely terrified. However, the bird was prepped for the scene with them initially holding it in cupped hands and then having it fly out. The bird trainer then worked up to putting it into their open mouth before they then practiced closing it for a couple of seconds. So eventually, they worked their way up to this. Catwoman then gives herself a bath by licking her hands and rubbing her suit, and the whole scene just pretty wild. There's a Happy Meal attached to this. The next day we then cut to her saying,
Why are you doing this?
and yeah, I was asking the same thing. Bruce spots her though, and the pair kinda go back and forth about how the press is lying about Batman and Catwoman. Selina then says this,
It's gonna be a hot time on the cool town tonight.
which is a callback to when Joker said it in the first film.
Oh, there'll be a hot time in the old town tonight.
I'm not sure why she says it, but in the first film it was used as a way to show the timeless feel of Gotham. Composed by Theodore A. Metz, this song was made in 1896. Also, I love how you can see the Ice Princess in the background, and it kinda leads into the next scene. Pelting her full force in the face with a batarang, Penguin then takes her hostage. With Bruce, we see a kind of awkward day and see them bringing up Vicky. We discover that she left because she couldn't handle his dual lives, and the prior film ended with him being late for their date. Here the date's also ruined by the fact that the batarang's been discovered in the Ice Princess's dressing room. I love how Gordon's having to present it to the news, but you can tell like the guy's like, "You didn't do it, mate, it's been a setup, that's my boy." Like, he doesn't even have to say it, you can just tell by the acting. Anyway, the pair end up parting ways and both use Alfred as a way to tell the other they have to go. Again, it's a cute little moment that adds a lot of character to the movie. There's so many moments like this that they could have just presented it in a really flat way, but yeah, they constantly deliver stuff in a creative way. We then have the juxtaposition of Bruce sitting up in his cave while Selina does it in the car. This moment shot in a similar way to the Batmobile leaving the house at the beginning, and it just does such a good way of kind of comparing the two characters. She's got just the one costume that she has to keep stitching, whereas Bruce's money allows him to have multiple suits. I always loved how you could also see a place for the symbol as well, with his holding the cape down. We also have his boots, and the feet of these were just Air Jordan 6s, with the boots then built up around them. Batman looks great stepping out of the changing room though, and we then see as the Batmobile pulls into Gotham. Hacked by the circus cabal, we then watch as Bruce goes to the Ice Princess. Using a zip line, this gadget would later become a staple of the Arkham games. Fighting Catwoman, it's kind of an opposite in dynamics to the scene the pair just shared at the mansion. Now Penguin sends her over the edge by throwing an umbrella that releases bats. Batman later flips the script with this and he ends up doing the same thing at the zoo. This sends Penguin crashing into the water, so it's a nice flip on them, sending the Ice Princess to her death.
How did Batman beat you?
Love.
Oh. He threw me out a window.
Now this was actually a carryover from Batman 89, where bats were originally going to take down the Joker. The helicopter would fly over the cathedral and this would stir the bats hanging in the rafters. They'd then come out and swarm the Joker, which would make him fall to his death. However, they wanted Batman to have some agency in his downfall, so that's why they gave the moment to him. The cops then arrive, and though Gordon says hold your fire, we see as he's shot over the edge. Now in what's a carryover from the kitty litter scene, we see Batman land with a giant circular window in the shop behind him. This was where the pair spoke out before, and she once again tries to stab him with her nail. This time though, he fully comes out on top and he goes over the edge getting away while she remains behind. It's also in this moment we get the whole thing about mistletoe, which later gives away who they are.
Mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it.
Mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it. But a kiss can be even deadlier.
A kiss can be even deadlier.
These were other bits I used to fast forward to as well, because the gliding cape moment, it just always looks so cool. And Matt Reeves would later take inspiration from this, with him creating a more realistic version of the glider. Still, we see as bats swarm the city as he flies like a demon overhead. You can totally see why people would view him as a villain, and Nolan also clearly took a lot of inspiration from this. There is a moment in Batman Begins where we see victims of the Scarecrow's fear gas imagine a giant bat flying over the city. Now this moment was actually one of the only carryovers from the original treatment, with that script having his cape alter into a glider. Back with Catwoman, we then see she rejects Penguin. Hanging her with his helicopter umbrella, we then see again how this happens in front of that circular window. So we have this idea of rejection repeated here thematically, or they just didn't have the money to build more sets. Either way, we have Batman, Shrek and Penguin that have all dropped Catwoman from a height. Catwoman also counts down how many lives she has left, with it playing into how cats are supposed to have 9. According to IMDb trivia, Bob Kane cited the 9 lives myth as the reason he made Catwoman a cat.
What the hell are you talking about?
Returning to the car, we then see as Penguin takes control of it in what's one of the funniest scenes in the film. I swear, I rode in one of these toy Batmobiles the Penguin has at like a supermarket once, and I love what this scene allows the Batmobile to do. Running cars off the road and careening through the streets, it shows how powerful the ride would be if Batman ever went bad. And this car was so ahead of its time, it even had a CD player in 1992. Nobody had any idea what CDs even were, mate, I swear, and I don't even think the creative team did either. That's because later on, Bruce scratches it to replay a bit, and the amount of CDs are ruined trying to do this. It was mental. My parents were not happy. That Whitney Houston album is never be played again. However, what it allows Batman to do is get this recording.
I played this stinking city like a harp from hell! I played this stinking city like a harp from hell!
Now, due to the havoc, Batman has to flee from the police, which leads to him going to a back alleyway. Now, I always loved the little bit of worry on Bruce's face after he realizes the car won't collapse.
Alright, now I'm a little worried.
This is another line that's kind of become a mainstay catchphrase in my real life, and whenever I'm driving and something won't work, I say this, much to my wife's annoyance. However, when this works, we see the car collapse down to just its main compartments, which is such an amazing part of the movie. This would later go on to inspire Christopher Nolan with a bat pod launching from the car during The Dark Knight. As Oswald gives his speech, we then see Bruce and Alfred and get this line.
Security? Who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave?
Now, this was a big point of contention around the first film, with the writers and producers denying it was their idea. I do wonder if she went in the Iron Maiden way, which is what we see Bruce descend through. Alfred says he'll take the stairs, but you get there in the exact same time, Bruce, so I don't even know why you had this built, other than to just make a little cool slide in the house. Like, he doesn't get there any faster. Anyway, after Oswald's exposed, we see he's pelted with tomatoes. Devito apparently refused to do this, and they had to coax him into standing there getting pelted with eggs and vegetables. Running back to the sewers, this carries the theme over from the beginning, with him once more journeying here after being rejected by high society. This base somewhat riffs off the comics, where Burton said it was inspired by The Killing Joke. That at the time was Burton's favourite graphic novel, and it had Joker making a base out of an amusement park. Also, I love how we get the one guy who says it's maybe gone a bit too far.
Penguin? I mean, killing sleeping children. Isn't that a little...
No! It's a lot!
This later allows Shrek to get the gun, and he finds it beside his corpse underwater. Back at the cave, in another bit of comedy, we watch as Bruce gets an invite to Shrek's party that he turns down, and Alfred rips up. Changes his mind though, and yeah, we need to make a reaction supercut of all Alfred's disapproving looks. Now we then cut to the masquerade ball, and Burton really gets to flourish here. To an instrumental version of Super Freak, we see as Shrek asks Bruce who he's come in costume as. However, Bruce is of course the mask, and we also see this reflected in Selena. She too has come out of costume, and the pair go back and forth about wearing masks.
You take off our costumes.
I guess I'm tired of wearing masks.
Nolan later referenced this in The Dark Knight Rises when he had the scene with Selena and Bruce at the party where the latter went out of costume. Well, he didn't wear a costume, but he was Bruce Wayne. Now this is the more obvious subtext, but there's also more niche things like what we see at the hour 35 mark. On the stairs, we see a man dressed as the Red Death character from Phantom of the Opera. This in itself was a reference to The Mask of Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. In case you haven't read that, the wiki sums it up perfectly and discusses how it applies to the movie. Now the story is basically about a group of elite people who are trying to survive a plague ravaging the country. They decide to seal themselves inside a giant abbey and enjoy themselves by having a masquerade ball. However, guests from the outside shows up wearing the red mask of death, and slowly they kill the party members through infecting them. In the end, the last few survivors take the costume off and find there's nothing within it. The red mask of death is actually an embodiment of the plague, which in turn then kills them. Scholars have said this story's social commentary on how the rich will ignore the issues of the poor until it affects them directly. This works perfectly when applied to the movie, as we have the rich at this ball while Gotham's ravaged by the gang. At the hour 30-35 mark, we can also see a man walk by with a silver-winged helmet. Now this is a nod to the Golden Age version of The Flash, namely Jay Garrick. This little Easter egg would come full circle over 20 years later, as we of course had Keaton starring in The Flash. Jay Garrick also appeared in the multiverse scene from that, and as I've been saying, it's all connected. Now you might also notice the mayor has a knife in his back, which highlights a betrayal by Shrek. This comes right after the explosion when Penguin enters the party. And we learn Penguin's personally come for Chip, but Max manages to trade places. Now I couldn't find anything to back this up, but I believe it probably came from the screenplay in which the pair were revealed as brothers. Technically, Max could have been said to be the firstborn son of the Cobblepots, and thus it would make sense to take him. Either way though, that's just a theory. Now across Gotham we see as the Red Triangle gang goes to collect the children before they're thwarted surrounded by Batman. The film originally was going to have a moment where the kids would be pulled from their beds with them being carried off screaming into the night. According to IMDb trivia though, Burton knew kids would see the movie, so in the end he didn't include the scene. Just left all the Penguin flirting stuff in. Anyway, we watch as Batman sends the monkey in with a message for Penguin. This message is actually written in Bob Kane's handwriting, which is a little nod to the co-creator. Now apparently, when the monkey did this though, he ended up trying to grab Danny DeVito's balls.
They let the monkey go up top, and I walk up to the edge and I go, wait for the monkey. The monkey comes down, takes one look at me, and leaps at my balls. Right in here. He took a big, big mouthful. Now, thank God I'm in this suit that is like full of all these padding and shit. I did not feel a thing, thank God. Like this far away, and I probably wouldn't be telling this story right now.
Penguin then launches his army of penguins, with the movie ramping up to its final action set piece. Driving the Batboat into the sewers, we also hear as the Poodle Lady does the countdown.
10, 9, 8, 7.
Now this monotonous announcement was apparently done as a little nod to Diamonds Are Forever.
1 minute and counting.
40 seconds and counting.
With a signal jammed by Alfred, they then return home and Shrek manages to escape. Poodle Lady then disappears too, and the person that defeated Batman's still at large. Love how she uses the shadows to disappear, and that's also one of his tricks. I think she might actually be the perfect opposite to Batman. Now Penguin's stopped in his escape plan by the boat smashing into his ride, which leads to Batman and the character going toe to toe. Though Penguin thinks he's won by grabbing the remote, this actually activates the rockets which then swarm the location. Now with Shrek, we see as he's caught by Catwoman, whose costume seen better days. Batman's has as well, and Bruce ends up tearing off his mask to speak face to face with her. Always annoyed me that you can see the eye makeup disappear in the before and after, and I like that Reeves finally embraced having it as part of the character. Now though Selina would love to live in Bruce's castle like the fairy tales, she ends up rejecting this idea. Scratching his face, this leaves a similar mark to what she gave Falcone in Year One. Shrek then shoots him and unloads his gun on Selina as we count down the lives. It's such a great scene, and in the end it's not enough. Selina then gives him a taser-laced kiss, which adds some irony into Shrek's death. Here was a villain who wanted to suck all the power from the city, and then now being electrocuted while sucking on a taser. If you pay close attention at the hour 55:27 mark, you can also catch the pair step out of the way as things start to fall apart. This shows how Selina survived, though Shrek wasn't as lucky. Who has come back though is the Penguin, with him dying and then being given a funeral march by his penguins. You might also notice as they drop him in the water that you can see the board that was pulling him get pulled out the way. The way they play it is a really sad moment, but like the guy was trying to kill hundreds of kids in Gotham. Anyway, we end with Bruce on his own being driven by Alfred, which is sort of a flip on where we left Vicky in the first film. There we panned up the buildings to catch Batman looking at the signal, and here they reverse it with it being Catwoman. Bruce sees her shadow moving in the alleyway, and then he comes across a black cat. Wishing goodwill towards men and women, we then pan up to see she survived. Now this shot originally wasn't in the film, and that's not even Michelle Pfeiffer's head. However, test screenings had responded really well to Pfeiffer's performance, with them saying it was one of the best parts of the movie. Warner Brothers were thinking of the franchise, and they mandated the movie had to end with this shot. However, it wasn't cheap to get everything together, and this single shot alone cost $250,000. So there were plans to have a sequel continue with the character in it, but as we know, it didn't turn out that way. Now though Warner Brothers had their reservations, the movie was still a massive success. It made $47.7 million in the opening weekend, which back in the 90s was a record-setting number. Whether that's the quality of the film or just building off the hype of the first movie, I'll leave that to you to decide. However, as a kid, this was my Batman. Going back to it though, I could see flaws, but it brought back so many happy memories. This would then lead into my love of Batman the Animated Series, which gave us more iconic performances. I can't believe that it's also been 2 years since Kevin Conroy passed away, and yeah, it's just crazy looking back, seeing this movie and how many happy times it gave me. I hope you've had some too, and huge thank you for checking out the video. Please drop a like, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. We get early access to videos every week, and it goes such a long way towards helping us out. It's just 99 pence or 99 cents a month, and we've tried to set it at a price where it hopefully won't mean a lot to you, but if enough of you do it, it'll mean a lot to us. So huge thank you to everyone who's joined that, and if you want something else to watch, we've got a video on screen screen right now. That is our breakdown for Batman 89, so yeah, if this has piqued your interest, then definitely head over there. If you've already seen it, then definitely check out our Penguin breakdown, with that also being a big Batman story you definitely should check out. With out of the way, thank you for sticking through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.